Super Mario World versus Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Which game is the best? Let's find out. So both games are 16-bit 2D platformers where you need to get from point A to point B. Both games have you traversing through different types of worlds and areas throughout the adventure. Both games have very simple and sometimes easy boss fights, and both games have a very harsh difficulty curve the further you progress through the games. Super Mario World was a launch title for the SNES and came out between 1990 and 1991. And guys, guess what? Sonic 2 is a sequel to the original Sonic the Hedgehog game. I think my brain just expanded. However, Sonic 2 came out in 1992, which makes Mario World the older game between the two. Much like Sonic 1, Sonic 2's main focus is on the speed. However, unlike Sonic 1, it actually has levels that complement this speed instead of Labyrinth Zone. On the other hand, Super Mario World has more emphasis on power-ups, and those power-ups impacts the gameplay much more than Sonic 2's power-ups do. I know I mentioned earlier that Sonic 2's levels complement the speed of the game a lot more than Sonic 1, but in general, it mostly stuck to the same control scheme as Sonic 1, but they just refined it overall and thankfully gave us the spin dash. Honestly, it's so nice to have the spin dash here. It's super useful and it makes going back to Sonic 1 that much more difficult. On the other hand, Super Mario World massively enhanced Mario's movements, giving us the spin drill, if you want to call it that, looser controls, and those power-ups, man. I'm telling you, the cape feather, that's quite possibly my favourite Mario power-up of all time. It is so fun to use. I mean, just the fact that we can glide around and fly throughout this entire game is one thing, but we can also attack enemies with it, deflect things, and overall, it's super fun to control. Although I don't have a problem with Sonic 2's if it ain't broke don't fix it approach, I think Super Mario World's playstyle was a lot more impressive, considering that 1, this is a 2D 16-bit game, and 2, they've actually evolved Mario's moveset. That's definitely a lot more impressive. And ultimately, Mario's moveset evolved after this. Speaking of evolving, not only did the visuals change in the 16-bit era, but so did the music. How do these games' soundtracks sound? To be honest, I'm not really going to build any anticipation because both of these soundtracks are so well known and so popular, I would be wasting everyone's time. They're both extremely good. Super Mario World's soundtrack is super iconic and very enjoyable, just as enjoyable as you pressing the subscribe button and turning on the bell notification if you haven't done so already. You see what I did there? Basically, if you're a fan of Nintendo and Sega, you'll absolutely love this channel. We cover them quite a lot here. So make sure that you hit that big red subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so that you don't miss a single one of my videos. Thanks. Honestly, I think the real question is what's not so good about the Super Mario World soundtrack. It's amazing. Another thing that's quite amazing is the fact that the same melody was used throughout the majority of the themes, and yet it still sounds quite varied and non-repetitive. I don't know how Nintendo managed to pull that off, but that's very impressive. If I had to pick my favourite theme from the game, I think easily my favourite theme is the castle one. That theme gives me chills, man. I will be here all day if I were to talk about the music and just breaking down how they affect me and why I like them so much, but yeah, that castle theme, man, I get goosebumps when I listen to that theme. So good. Most importantly, each and every theme matches each and every level extremely well. So in terms of theming and matching the sound with the location, Nintendo did a very good job here. Sonic 2's soundtrack is, I mean, it's your typical 16-bit Sega OST. Nothing but absolute bangers. Listen, if you want to talk about variety in the music, Sonic 2 has got that in spades. On one end of the spectrum, you've got Sky Chase Zone, super chill and beautiful to listen to. But then on the other hand, you've got Chemical Plant Zone. Nothing but energy, tenseness, and more energy. I don't really need to describe it too much, it's super iconic. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there is a ton of variety found in the music for Sonic 2, and it matches each and every level's moods extremely well. I'm a little bit biased towards 16-bit Sega music, so I personally prefer the Sonic 2 soundtrack. It's a lot more funky and electronic, which is more my taste, but to each their own. I think my favorite theme from Sonic 2 is probably the bonus stage. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but it's just so energetic, so exciting, and for me personally, super nostalgic. It hits different every time it comes on, just takes me back to being 4 years old again. That theme, it's too much, man. And if you want to talk about main levels, I mean, I kind of gotta go with Chemical Plant Zone. Super tense, and come on now, it's an absolute bop. So it's probably no surprise that both of these soundtracks are super iconic. Honestly, they're good for it. But what about the levels, pacing, and the overall games themselves? Well, Super Mario World uses the world by world formula, much like the other Mario games on the NES, and come to think about it, the themes found in Super Mario World are quite similar to the themes found in the Mario NES games. That's not a bad thing though, because one, if it ain't broke don't fix it. Sonic 2 did that in a couple of areas mentioned earlier, but two, the levels found in Super Mario World are very cool. The level design is a lot nicer and more detailed compared to the NES games, so at least visually there's some progression here. Not only that, but because Super Mario World encourages exploration, these levels feel massive and fun to run around in, when you're not getting bombarded by stuff that you would never see coming. Remember what I said at the start of the video when I said that Mario World and Sonic 2 both have very harsh difficulty curves the further you progress through the game? Yeah, it's time to talk about that. I found Super Mario World to be quite frustrating to play through overall, simply because the game is unforgiving and throws absolutely everything at you. Now, am I good at the game? No comment. I understand that games back in the day were usually this difficult and sometimes even more difficult than this. But my days, sometimes it feels like Nintendo wants me to have a DeLorean parked outside of my house so I can go forward into the future, so I can expect something that I would otherwise not see coming. The levels are no means bad, because as mentioned earlier, it's super fun to explore the levels and they're quite expansive compared to the NES titles. But when it comes to difficulty like this, and I'm just gonna put it out there, unfairness like this, I just can't be asked after a while. I'm just gonna put it out there. I think Sonic 2 has more level variety compared to Super Mario World. Yeah, Super Mario World has more levels, full stop, but theming wise, layout wise, and in terms of what's going on in the levels, I feel like Sonic 2 has more variety. Do not get it twisted. Sonic 2 can most definitely be frustrating, unfair, and infuriating at times. Do I even need to mention any names? Metropolis Zone Act 1 onwards, wave it off. Wave it off, bro. One thing that I've always loved about the Sonic games is that there's a million paths to take to get to the end of each zone, which is quite nice, and especially when you keep replaying the game, there are lots of different ways to complete the level. One playthrough you might go one way, but then the playthrough after that you might go an entirely different way. Keeps things fresh. Speaking of fresh, Emerald Hill Zone aside, the level themings were mostly brand new, such as Chemical Plant Zone and Mystic Cave Zone. Although Mario World's levels, designs and themes are great, Sonic 2 was definitely more original in terms of new ideas for levels, and on top of that, Sonic 2 had far less stages than Super Mario World. And it's not like these new levels are just okay, they're great. In fact, the majority of them are better than the ones found in Sonic 1. And on top of that, your playthrough is most likely going to be different each and every time if you choose to pick different paths in each level every single time. Mario World kind of has this with the secret exits, but it's not quite the same. For the most part, you still have to play through the level the same until you get to that one part where you change. Adding to the fact that these levels are a major step up compared to the levels found in Sonic 1, the music is really good, and they took the gameplay from the first game and made it better, I'm giving this one to Sonic 2. Sonic 2 was basically what Sonic 1 was supposed to be in the beginning, and pretty much just got rid of all of its issues. Some may mention that Yoshi makes the gameplay a lot more interesting, and Yoshi is a much more helpful sidekick than Tails, which I agree with, and I know some people might say that the boss fights are super repetitive, but it's also repetitive in Super Mario World as well. So to be honest, it's either or. There's definitely no disputing that Super Mario World is one of the most important and one of the most beloved games of all time. However, in my opinion, Sonic 2 was the more enjoyable 2D experience. I'm just gonna put it like that. Okay, I know I mentioned the bonus stages earlier and how much I love the music, but my goodness, when you progress through the game, Tails just makes you want to flip tables.